I think the important part is putting yourself out there and networking and leaning on others, because if I hadn't made that call to my 3 friends in the industry, I don't know where I would have been.
How many people go through life doing work they really don't like, but every day dreaming of, say, working in the aviation industry? They say it's too late. They think it would be too hard. They think it would go against conventional norms. If you never go after what you want, you'll never have it. This is Fly the Transition. Join us as we soar through the captivating stories of individuals embracing a thrilling journey into the aviation industry. From pilots spreading their wings to mechanics fine-tuning the engines and a myriad of industry professionals, each with a unique tale to tell. Get ready to dive into the diverse backgrounds, the pivotal moments that propelled their leap, and the sheer determination that transformed their aspirations into reality. We're not just about dreams. We're about making them take flight. Welcome to Fly the Transition. And now your host, Jim Schilling.
Welcome back, all my aviation friends, to another episode of Fly the Transition, where we will explore yet another journey of aviation career transformation. In this episode, we'll get back into some interviews as we are going to talk with Sean Crow. Sean is a former realtor who is now working in a Part 135 operation. In just a few minutes, he'll tell us all about the journey that he took, the pros and cons of his prior career, as well as what was applicable from his old career into his career in aviation. Before we get to the interview, just want to read an email that I got as a bit of feedback from my episode with Matthew Beachy. In Gordon's feedback, he writes in part, "Your show has a lot of potential during this time of pilot shortage and the changing economy. I had not heard of it before, but recognize the potential, and I'm glad you're putting these together." The really great part of this email is he goes on to suggest another potential guest for the future, who I plan on reaching out to very soon. So thank you so much, Gordon, for that email. Appreciate the feedback as well as the lead on a future guest. As long as we're talking about emails and reviews, just a reminder, if you leave a review on wherever you're listening to this podcast, or if you send me an email, I'd be happy to read your feedback on a future episode. Next up, a quick update on my own personal aviation journey. I have finished writing my lesson plans for my CFI rating, and I am super pumped to have that step of this CFI process behind me. Now I just have to go back and revise some of them and get some of the fine-tuning done so that I'm prepared to present them at that all-important check ride. The one thing that I want to point out here is I'm really grateful to my instructor who encouraged me to not just go out and buy some sort of commercially available lesson plan, but to write them myself and really dive into the material. I've said this in prior episodes that I think that it was really beneficial to have that step of diving in further so that I could learn how I'm going to explain these things to someone who's not necessarily well-versed in aviation. And in speaking of steps towards that ultimate goal, I also, by the time you listen to this podcast, will be taking my written test for the fundamentals of instruction. On the last episode, we talked about my prep for that test, and I feel really good about my preparation steps and my overall grasp of that material. So hopefully in the next episode, I can share some news with you about that test. All right, so on to the interview for this episode. I'll be talking with Sean Crow, who is passionate about sharing his story because it was others who helped to mentor and guide him that got him to where he is today. Sean started in aviation in high school when he was around 17 years old, but didn't go down that path for a career. What he would ultimately end up doing is working in business and real estate until a point came when he met with a career coach and really opened his eyes to the possibility of doing something that truly made him happy. He'll talk to us about the ups and downs, the pros and cons, and all the steps of his journey to help inspire you to make that leap into a career in aviation. So without further ado, my interview with Sean Crow on the Fly the Transition podcast. All right, well, I'd like to welcome Sean to the Fly the Transition podcast. Sean, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast tonight. Look forward to hearing about your story.
Yeah, I'm very excited to be able to share that this evening or this morning or wherever anyone is listening to this. So, yeah, I just hope that someone will get a few nuggets to take away from this.
That's the plan. Awesome. Well, I'm going to jump into the first real obvious question for me of how did you first get exposed to aviation? Is this something that you grew up with or stumbled on later in life or?
So I come from a family of pilots, but not necessarily from the professional aspect. So my grandfather and my great grandfather, they all flew general aviation and they owned airplanes when they were, or I guess when I was growing up. So I was exposed to that. And they had businesses that they ran that they used the planes for. And my grandfather, we would go up to Canada and he had a 206 that was on floats. And so I would kind of sit there and handle the flight controls as a kid. And he would make it seem like I was flying, which I really was in the air. But it was something that was ingrained in me from an early age. So fortunately, I did have the capacity to have my grandfather help fund a good majority of my flight lessons. So I decided to get into flying and officially took my first loggable hour back in 1999. And that was when I was still in high school.
Okay. So how old were you?
Yeah. In 99, I was 17.
Okay.
Yeah. So I always remembered my grandfather, he soloed or he took lessons at 16 and I didn't quite beat him to the punch there, but I was pretty darn close.
Yeah, awfully close. So as you are starting that journey of flying and getting your first loggable hours, did it take you a while to like work towards your actual certificate, or is it just, how did that process work for you?
Yeah, so I have a very unusual way that I got into flying professionally, because when I started flying, I didn't know exactly if I was going to be flying for a career or anything like that. So I chose it strictly from the standpoint of like, I want to get my pilot's license and just fly for fun.
Okay.
And of course, I think a lot of listeners could probably relate to this, but when you were 17 years old, did you know what you wanted to do growing up? You know, it's just one of those things where being a young 17-year-old teenager, I was very naive and I had a lot of growing up to do. So when I was taking my hours, I did everything, all my training, part 61. Okay. So retrospectively should have done 141, but this, a different conversation for a different time. So I went at my own pace and eventually ended up getting my private pilot's license freshman year of college, and ended up going and getting my instrument rating shortly thereafter, because my grandfather, he really pushed me getting my instrument ticket right afterwards. He said, listen, son, if you're going to be doing this, you need to be a safer pilot. You'll be glad that you end up doing that. So that was kind of the natural, it was a natural trajectory for me. So I did all that in college as well.
Okay. And as you're going to college, I am assuming then that you're not going to college for aviation. You're going for something else.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and again, like I said, I have a non-traditional way of doing things. And so being from Midwestern Iowa, I decided to take my first semester of college at Arizona State. And I did not have my private pilot's license at that point in time, but I did have hours under my belt. Yeah. So I didn't do any sort of training while I was down there. And fortunately, it was just a semester. So I came back and transferred to Iowa State University and ended up doing the rest of my training up there. So again, I completed my private pilot certificate freshman year of college, got my instrument shortly thereafter, and then again asked the question of, well, what is the next step in the process? And it was getting my commercial rating. So again, going through the process and kind of leveling up each of the way through there. So, but never really ever considered it as a profession in the moment. I went to school for business management. So that was my actual major.
You're getting these certificates and you're going to school for business. What career path do you end up going down then?
Yeah, so right after college, I did a couple odds and ends jobs. I didn't have anything that was lined up very well, so I actually fell into real estate, becoming a real estate agent. And that was in 2005 of all things. And if anyone is listening that is knows what happened during that time of the decade, it probably wasn't the best time of getting in the real estate, but I really fared well with it because I had peers who were buying their first home at just out of college,
Yeah.
and of course the foreclosures were kind of starting to come on strong. So I worked with a lot of investors at the time. So having peers my age that took advantage of the first time home buyer tax credit and also working with investors helped kind of pull me through that time. And then I ended up selling real estate for a grand total of like 15 years before I had a coach that basically coached me out of real estate. And we can talk about that as well too.
Okay. I laughed when you mentioned the time frame because that's when my wife and I bought our first house, is 2006. It was a terrible time to buy a house.
Yeah, it's amazing. Everything's cyclical, and right now, I mean, I've got my own thoughts about it. It's just the market right now is bananas, and it's just super unsustainable right now. It's unsustainable, so there will be a shift here soon.
Yeah. Was there something appealing about real estate that drew you that direction?
Mostly was just the opportunity of being my own boss, making as much or as little as I wanted to make, and just kind of, I have an entrepreneur background with my family, and that was kind of the draw. So yeah, just kind of being able to build a business that tailored to my lifestyle. And I really did end up enjoying the relationship aspect of working with buyers and sellers and that kind of stuff and structuring the deals. So that was also kind of fun.
Okay. For you as a real estate agent, and not even necessarily just starting off, just in general, what were some of the challenges that you faced to that profession?
When I got in, it was when I was 22, 23. So I was young, and I faced a lot of folks who were like, what is this kid doing in real estate? You know, they had a really tough time putting their trust into someone who was just fresh out of college.
Sure.
So the demographics that I excelled at, like I said, were my peers, one of them, and then also folks who were like the age of my grandparents, because they looked at me as like their grandson who was going to take care of them.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, and incidentally, the demographics that I did struggle with were folks that were my parents' age, because they looked at me as their son who was, and someone who was inexperienced and like, oh gosh, my son is just out of college, just starting a career. Like he or she doesn't know anything. And it's like, why should I use you? So it was very interesting. But as I matured in the business and gained a track record, it became a lot easier over time.
Were there certain skills or attributes that you had that made that get easier over time?
Yeah, I would say mostly just kind of my personality and having a level of care with people. I've always maintained that there's a saying that I use over and over, is that people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And so when people realized that I was taking them through a process, which was one of the biggest purchases of their life, I was going to be there for them and see it through until the end and be on their side. And so whenever I was posed with a challenge in the transaction, I was able to find a way to overcome that and mostly get it through and take care of it. So I think that they saw value in that, and they really cared that I cared.
What would you describe, and maybe there isn't a typical one, but what was like the typical day in the life of your prior profession of real estate look like for you?
Yeah, it's a good question, because it's all about keeping your pipeline of leads filled, right? So obviously not everyone you talk to is going to be in the market to buy or sell a house. So it's the matter of taking a large subset of people in your database, marketing to them, and maintaining contact with them over a period of time, developing that relationship, and being there for when the time does come for them to buy or sell. And furthermore, it's not just them, but also earning their trust so that when someone that they know is looking to buy, sell, or invest, then they can refer business to you. So there was a lot of networking involved in that. And I think that's because if you don't have anyone to sell a house to or a house to sell, then your business doesn't matter. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I suppose none of those, the skills we talked about earlier, it doesn't make any difference if you can't apply them somewhere.
Yeah. If you don't have the database, then you're not going to sell a house. So making sure that you have that database and you're nurturing them and caring for them and being the top agent that they think of when it comes time to buy or sell, then you've got it made. But it's all about positioning. When I say, hey, name a toothpaste right out of the gates, you're going to name probably a Colgate or an Aquafresh because it's the one that you use and it's the top of mind. So you want to be that Colgate, you want to be that toothpaste. So you want to be in front of them as much as possible. And that was all about the networking aspect.
Yeah, for sure. So as you got going within this career, I assume you had some success with it. Is this something where you were able to build on that and climb within your company? Or
so when I got into real estate, I started with a brokerage that was a very dependent model, and after a couple of years with selling with them, I went to an independent model, and after a few years there of gaining success, I went to a model or a brokerage that has what we consider like a interdependent model. So it has aspects of both of them, kind of like a hybrid model.
Sure.
And within that, I was being recognized as one of the top producers in the company. And furthermore, I was gaining kind of a little bit of a leadership aspect that others were noticing. So then I got kind of the tap on the shoulder, if you will, to be interviewing for a leadership position within there. And I went ahead and I became the assistant team leader of that market center and basically coached and mentored a lot of different agents throughout the process and helped them build their business and ultimately build the market center's business within that period of time as well. So I was able to coach and train as a result of that.
What would you say was the most rewarding part of that job?
I think if anyone has ever been a coach in their life, they can say that when you see someone do the activities that you presented them that they would have never thought of on their own and they find success with that, then that is something that is very rewarding to me, or I guess to a coach, is that they are seeing success with the ideas and tools that they have implemented as a result of what you suggested.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So what would you feel are the major pros and cons of that job?
I would say, okay, so the pros for being a realtor in and of itself, you have the capacity to build something sustainable or to build a life by design, if you will.
Okay.
And I think that is one of the biggest pros because you can scale your business as big as you want by building a team and adding people to it, or as small as you really want it. So it's all by design. The con is that if you stop lead generation, if you stop talking to people, your pipeline is going to dry up. And I think that is one of the things that people need to understand if they're in real estate is that it's a contact sport. You need to keep in touch with people. when I became the assistant team leader of our market center, I had to step outside of the sales role and be dedicated solely in the coaching and training environment. For me, in that moment with the coaching aspect, I'd say the pros is that you get to help others succeed and build their businesses by design, which is really cool. The con was that I had to step away from my real estate sales business for a period of time in order to focus on that.
Okay. Before we continue with this episode, a quick word from those who help make the Fly the Transition podcast possible. Are you tired of uncomfortable sunglasses in the cockpit? Well, check out Flying Eyes Optics, designed by pilots for pilots. These ultra-lightweight, durable frames fit perfectly under your headset without that painful pressure you experience with cheaper sunglasses. Don't let discomfort distract you from the joy of flying. Visit our affiliate link and use affiliate code FlyingMidwest10 and you will save 10% off your next pair while helping to support the podcast. Elevate your flying experience with Flying Eyes. Thinking of upgrading your headset? Well, Lightspeed Aviation headsets are perfect for transitioning pilots and those in training alike, combining crystal clear audio with industry-leading noise cancellation. Whether you're just starting training or you're already in that full transition to aviation, a Lightspeed headset will give you that edge. Visit our affiliate link down in the show notes and you too can explore your next go-to headset. If you love the podcast, now you can represent it wherever you go. Check out our Fly the Transition merch store for exclusive designs including t-shirts, hats, and more, all crafted for the aviation enthusiasts. Get your gear and show the world that you're following your aviation dreams. Head on over to flyingmidwest.com/merch and start repping Fly the Transition today.
You're listening to Fly the Transition. If you've ever thought about changing careers and getting into the aviation industry, welcome to your new home. Now, back to your host, Jim Schilling.
So at what point do you decide that you want to either explore or move towards a career in aviation? Was there like a pivotal moment or some sort of change that pushed you towards that?
Yeah. So remember how I just shared with you the aspect of the rewards of being a coach?
Uh-huh.
Well, as coaches, or you think about this as like I had a coach. So my real estate coach, when I was doing the real estate sales, had been coaching me for a period of time, and we got to know one another. And he opened up one of our coaching calls out of the gates and said, "You know what, Sean, I get the impression that you do not enjoy selling real estate anymore." And that was a gut punch in the moment statement to come out of the gates with. And so we went down that rabbit hole of the meaning, the question behind the question. And so he asked the right questions to help open up, why am I in real estate? And one of the questions that he asked me was, if you weren't selling real estate, what would you be doing? And it was just like I vomited out the words, I'd be flying airplanes. And he's like, well, that's interesting. He said, why did you get into real estate and why not flying? So we went down that rabbit hole. But at the end of the conversation, there were two things that he shared with me. He gave me an opportunity to reflect on the success of Robin Williams. And when you think about the outcome of what he had in his life, to me and you, we would define him as being successful, and yet the gentleman was not happy. Yeah. And I really thought about that, and I thought to myself, my goodness, maybe I am not happy, and I would be truly happy doing something else. Not that I would ever resort to something like that, but I mean, there was a good parallel in that, in conveying that message. But then the other key piece of information that he said was, Sean, you need to act like you're 5, 6, 7, 8 years old again and re-explore that opportunity just to see what it does for you. You owe it to yourself to just explore that. And so at the end of that call, I called up 3 of my friends who were in the industry. a pilot at American, a pilot at Delta, and another one at FedEx. And all three of them said, based on your history and your experience, and with the fact that the aviation market is desperate need of pilots right now, I would say if you're looking to get back in, now's the time. And so basically I was starting to make the transition out of real estate at that moment mentally. And I went home and I told my wife about the coaching call and said, hey, I'm going to become a pilot. And of course, when I met my wife, she knew me as a realtor. So that's all she's ever known.
Okay.
She knew I flew airplanes, but she didn't know that I wanted to take it as a career. And I thought back to the opportunity. Well, my goodness, in 2005, with the lowered restrictions and everything, I had the opportunity to go to the airlines, but I bypassed it. Like, I'm not going to let this opportunity bypass me again.
Sure.
I'm going to go. And so that created a whole new conversation about what we were going to do as a family. But at the same time, I just decided I'm going to plunge into this head first and really take this opportunity and run with it.
So as you're making the consideration of going from real estate into aviation, it sounds like you had some like a heart-to-heart with your significant other and try to figure out what that would look like and the direction you would go. In that conversation, what kind of considerations or challenges did you guys anticipate?
Yeah, that was that was a tough one because I remember my wife asking me, like looking me in the eyes and saying, this is something you really want to do? And with full conviction, I said, yes, absolutely. I missed this opportunity. So this is what I want to do. And we were living in Des Moines at the time. And so she said, well, if you're going to do this, like, I want to move back home to my hometown to be closer to my family if we're going to raise a family. And without skipping a beat, I said, listen, if you're going to be along with me for this ride and accommodate me in this transition, then I'm going to make the same for you.
Sure.
So I agreed to that. So we sold our house in Des Moines and we moved to a small town in Pella, Iowa. If you're familiar with Pella Windows, that's headquarters right there. Okay. That's kind of how I help identify that with others who are unfamiliar. And so that was kind of the concession that we had to make. And honestly, ever since the transition, we with my current gig right now, is that we've got such a good working relationship on how the family works when I'm out of town and how it works when I'm back home, such that my wife knows that she's got her systems in place when I'm away. And quite frankly, she jokes about this, but when I come back, I ruin her systems, if you will. But the beautiful thing about where I'm at right now is that when I'm home, I alleviate 100% of her duties for the most part. I become full-time dad to the girls that I have. I got a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old. And so I wake them up in the morning. I get them ready. I put them to bed. I do as much as I can to help cook, but I give them baths. I basically watch them a lot. So my wife knows that she can kind of go off and be kid free for a while. Sure. So it's been a very good working relationship with that. And she appreciates the fact that my schedule is known in advance. So we plan everything around it. And it just about the only thing that stinks about it is that I'm gone, and I don't get to see everything, but that's to be expected as a pilot.
Yeah.
But when I'm home, I'm home 100%. I don't answer my work phone or anything like that because I don't have to. It's all dedicated to being present.
Yeah, and I suppose that's a complete difference from being a realtor. I'm sure that you're getting all kinds of phone calls outside of business hours.
You're right. Actually, that was a very big con to being a realtor, is that I was constantly turned on 24/7, negotiating transactions until 9, 10, 11 o'clock at night, or losing out on a deal because an inspection fell through, or financing, or whatever. It just, I think one of the things that I realized when I got back into aviation was that I didn't realize how much turmoil or how much stress I was under when I was in real estate. And all that just kind of went away when I got back into flying.
Yeah. So had you been flying at all with the ratings that you did have in the time in real estate?
Yeah, I did. My grandpa, he had an airplane and we were flying it on the regular. But in 2008, there were some things that happened within his business that he ended up selling the aircraft.
Okay.
And of course, we all know what happened during those times of the year, or decade again. And so I didn't really have any reason to fly, if you will. So, but I did miss it. So I would every once in a while just go out to the airport to stay current and rent an airplane.
Okay.
But it wasn't anything that was really fun to me. So when I was getting back into this, of course, I went up and I got current. I did an instrument proficiency check, and I started doing the work of what it took to get back into it, because 2008 to 2000, we'll call it 17, was when I got back in, or I was getting back into it.
Okay.
A lot of things have changed since then, right? iPads coming out, and just a lot of different things. And so, of course, I was very proficient back when I quit flying on the regular in 2008, but I just kind of felt like I had to start from scratch. So I went through the private pilot course on Sporties and the instrument pilot course on Sporties from start to end in its entirety, just to really do a deep cleanse of getting back into it.
Yeah.
And I did the work. I did the right steps, and I was networking with different operators in the Des Moines area to try to see if I could get on with a Part 91 gig there, and was trying to leverage my old connections in that, and wasn't able to find anything with that. But I did come across a 135 operator that was down in St. Louis. So
okay.
I explored that and was able to get in. So as soon as I started getting back in, by the way, before that, I ended up going back up to Iowa State and doing aerial photography and did a couple of contract jobs up there. But when I was doing the aerial photography, I was thinking to myself, day single engine VFR is not going to get me to my goals. So that's why I was looking to another operator, because I was at 1,000 hours roughly when I got back in to flying. So there was a little bit of a gap in order to go to the airlines at that point, obviously the 1,500 hours. So I had to figure out a way to bridge that gap.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you did aerial photography work for a while. How long did you do that?
I did it for just a summer.
Okay.
It was just one season, and I shared it with another gentleman. So I didn't have the whole photography summer to myself. So again, it wasn't as lucrative as I thought it was going to be to kind of help build hours. I mean, it worked, and it was a good segue of getting back into it and understanding how it all worked, and gave me the hours, right, to get paid for that. But it was not doing anything to get me the real world experience that I needed.
Gotcha.
And that's why I went to the operator out of St. Louis.
Okay. So what kind of work were you doing out in St. Louis then? Was it cargo, I think he had said?
Yep, cargo. So the carrier or the operator that I was flying with, we did a bunch of ad hoc cargo operations early on when I was there. And then we got a couple of contracts to fly radioactive medicine or radiopharmaceuticals.
Okay.
And so the fortunate piece of that is that when I was there during that time, we had a couple of contracts and we were flying real regularly and had routes that they were very consistent. And of course, during COVID, a lot of operators shut down or slowed business, but we didn't we didn't skip a beat. We didn't increase business. We didn't decrease business. It was like Corona never even happened. We always kind of joked because a lot of the FPOs, when we would roll up, they would roll out the red carpet to an old beater airplane, a cargo airplane, and we're like, hey guys, you don't need to roll the red carpet out to us, you know. But they had nothing else better to do, sure. And we always thought that was kind of funny. So, but yeah, and within that path there too, I displayed the leadership opportunities there, and also demonstrated my airworthiness, airmanship abilities as well. So I was a quicker upgrade into the Lear 35 there. And then by virtue of COVID, I guess I was kind of there for a longer period of time than I wanted to be, because I was living still up near Des Moines. So I was making the commute each week to and from St. Louis to make that work. So I had a desire to get out of there, but at the same time, it enabled me to gain more experience, and I became kind of the senior base captain there, and would mentor a lot of the new pilots that would come to the company, and sometimes it would be their first jet, and it just also wanted to not be the person who was just getting back into aviation, being the mentor, if you will.
Sure.
But I wanted to be mentored because I feel like there's still a lot for me to learn.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So when you first got into the cargo operation, what did training look like for you?
Yeah, so this was my real glimpse at what structured training looks like. And it was a 135 operation, and it was a bunch of classroom work, and learning the regs was something new to me because it's a different part, right?
Yeah.
That we all learn in just regular GA flying. And so I appreciated the format, and also how safety is pushed at a higher level through 135 operations. So yeah, from a company standpoint, it was a lot of in-class training. And then, of course, going to my first type rating, which is done at a CAE or flight safety,
sure,
or a SimCom, that kind of stuff.
Okay. When you started, how long did it take you to get up to speed then?
Yeah, so when I started with the 135 company, we went through the basic training. I believe it was maybe 3 weeks worth of training, and that was out in Columbus. So you had like a week and a half of classroom work, and then 4 or 5 days of flying, and they had a Baron 58 that you did your flying in. So that's what you initially got checked out in. So once you passed all the training, classroom work, the flight, then you had a little bit of time off, and then went back and basically went out to the line shortly thereafter. So it was pretty quick.
Okay. So from the last position you had, where you were the senior base captain role, talk to me about how you moved into your current operation.
Yeah. So like I said, during COVID time, I had applied to an operator that I think it was February, or yeah, it was January, February of 2020. And as we all know, what happened during that time of year.
Great timing.
Yeah, right. Perfect. Like everything about my life is great timing, it seems. I think everyone can relate to that, by the way.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So I get the nod that I am going to do the interview. However, they want to postpone it indefinitely. And so I had to wait an additional 6 to 7 months in order to do the interview, because that's when they were resuming the process. And so again, like I said, it gave me the opportunity to gain more PIC hours, and also mentor more SICs in the process, and just kind of fly on autopilot until the time came.
Talk to me about the next steps and then your move into this company.
So I had some friends that were at the previous operator who introduced me to the company that I'm at now. And I was very intrigued by the operations, and they had a lot of great things to say about it. So I leaned on them to kind of help get me in the door. And in the process of doing so, I said yes to the opportunity. There was no doubt in my mind that this is where I wanted to be. And so when I took the opportunity, I parted ways with the previous company and started the journey with where I'm at now. And when I came over here, I was in the airframe that I was selected to was the Challenger 300 350, which I was ecstatic about kind of going into after the Lear 35.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how did the operations differ between your previous company, Flying Cargo, and where you are now?
Yeah. So with the previous company, it was cargo. There's nothing much to say about it other than you're flying boxes or parts or whatever, right? So it was pretty low key in those regards. And during the summer, I'd wear a ball cap and shorts and in our company polo.
Okay.
And that was kind of my attire. So it was very low key. It was fun. And where I'm at now, I fly for a major fractional operator with whom we handle, or we fly high net worth individuals or companies around. We have between 2,500 and 3,000 contracts with the company. So yeah, it's a very large operator. And so to me, it kind of brings me back to my customer service roots, right? So I get to fly a cool jet and also deliver on what I feel is very important in a position such as this, because you're catering to, maybe not catering is the right word, but you're flying a different demographic to which you need to have some good customer service skills. And so I feel that I'm perfectly aligned in that regard.
I'm glad that you answered the way that you did, because one of my earlier questions talking about your traits and skills that made you successful as a realtor, I was hoping this was going to come back around as a trait or skill that has been transferable between your two jobs.
Yeah.
So in addition to your customer service skills, as long as we're on that topic, are there other skills that you found were transferable or helpful as you made this move into aviation?
Sort of. I with my previous career, if you will, with real estate, there was a lot of problem solving operations, if you will. I mean, not every deal was a slam dunk. So there were creative ways of getting the deal done that required a little bit of thinking outside of the box, or following some sort of protocol that helps get the deal done. And I think with this here too is that you're thrown situations on occasion that you have to really problem solve with. Not every flight is a slam dunk. It's not going to go exactly the way that you want it to go. And it's not even the flying aspect. With cargo, maybe a box is missing. Well, now how do you find that box?
Sure.
Or maybe the courier doesn't show up on time. Or what do you do then? And then also on the passenger side of things, catering is it adds to the element of the experience of flying private, right? And so like it is very important to people. So what happens if the catering doesn't show up? So there's a lot of problem solving that I feel that I'm really good with, and having that open line of communication is very important. So communication in real estate, uber important. Communication in flying airplanes, not only to ATC, but like to company or customers, is very important, right? So being very, very articulate in that is very helpful.
So within your company, talk to me a bit about like quality of life, scheduling, things like that.
When you start with our company, we do have a I guess, a PBS schedule that you start with. And it has been since redesigned since I've been on it. So I can't speak to the quality of what it is now, but as you gain seniority, the scheduling does get a little bit more preferential to your needs.
Okay.
So when I was very senior on the Challenger, I was getting the days that I had requested either on or off. And they roll on a 28-day period, I think, and they would like to see you work between 14 and 16 days. That's like ideal, 14 and 16 days per month or per rolling 28 days.
Okay.
You can have the capacity to work outside of that. And this is as an SIC or as an FO. So you have the capacity to work 11 days or 12 days as long as coverage is being met, and vice versa. You could work 17, 18 days, what have you. Of course, the company would like you to work longer, but yeah. So you do have a little bit of quality of life. And remember that when you're off, you're off. You're not expected to come back in or anything like that. So then in the position that I'm in now is that because it's 5 of us, there's no bidding system. We just create our own calendar. And so ideally what we're trying to obtain, and what every team, if you will, that is on the Gulfstream or the International Large Cabin program, is that they try to do an 8-6, 8-6, 8-13, and then cycle the process over again. As long as there's coverage on the airplane, that's how the design is looking to be. So, so what I to me, and I live in the Des Moines area, like I said, so Des Moines is my domicile, and we have over 110 domiciles with our company. So there's a lot of areas that you could live. And it's all home based, which is nice, but I like being away for that amount of time, because when I get home, I don't have to think about going back out to work right away.
Yeah.
I can have a chance to really decompress and do the home honey-do lists, and also reconnect with friends, that kind of stuff. So I do appreciate that. And then on the 13 days off, there's a stretch in there that you could potentially go on vacation and take care of that. So it's very nice.
What is the most rewarding part of your job now?
I think the most rewarding part about my current position is making sure that the customer gets no surprises. I think if there's a surprise, and what I mean by that is a delay or any type of mishap with catering, or the experience is tainted in some way where there's a surprise, to me, I don't think that that's acceptable. And that is something in real estate that I always strive to do, was make sure that there were no surprises. Nobody likes surprises. And so by going through a flight event and having them board the plane and exit the plane with a smile on their face and saying, good job, like, that is rewarding, because there were no surprises.
All right, Sean, as we get ready to wrap up here, if you could give anyone one piece of advice about changing careers in aviation, what would that be?
If you're thinking about making the switch, it was really tough for me to consider it at first, but talking to the right people helped, and understanding what that looked like in the process. And when I say what that looked like, I mean, it was a little bit of an income and lifestyle change for us to make the switch from real estate into flying airplanes. But the reward has more than doubled, tripled what it would have been if I stayed where I was. So I think the important part is putting yourself out there and networking and leaning on others. Because if I hadn't made that call to my 3 friends in the industry, I don't know where I would have been, because I was clueless about there being a pilot shortage back then.
Oh, sure.
Because I was so involved with where I was, and they also gave me the direction to kind of help get back into it in utilizing the resources. Remember, I had been out of flying on a regular basis in 7 years. So I was very clueless to what had changed. So what I'm getting at here is don't be afraid to do the work and lean on others to help you, guide you, and give you mentorship. And I've been so thankful in having them help me do that I have returned the favor to so many. With the current company that I'm at right now, I have introduced or brought on 13 individuals, I think, in a matter of 3 years that I've been here. Wow. And that is just because I've been an open book about my experience. And so therefore, if anyone wants to connect with me and has questions about making the jump, questions about my operation or the operator I fly for, I am absolutely more than happy to help give you the guidance and direction that you need in order to kind of seek that opportunity. So I'm very thankful for that. And that just kind of goes back full circle to people don't know how much, or people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And also just repaying what others have done for me.
That's an absolutely fantastic answer. I like the comment you made about, showing them through how much you care. So I think that's really beneficial and important for people to keep in mind. So you had mentioned about, if there's other people that are out there that are curious about getting in contact with you, about how you made your switch, maybe act as a mentor to them almost. Is there a way for them to contact you, or should I just throw that in our show notes? Or
yeah, I can provide my personal email, but I think as a professional, from one professional to another, I'm on LinkedIn. So Sean Crow, SeanCrow. You can look me up on LinkedIn. I'm very active on that in the sense that I don't post a lot on there, although I do follow and like a lot. I feel like I've got a pretty well-rounded profile. So, but I do engage with instant messaging on there, and I did take some time to really do what I feel is a pretty decent job with my profile and presenting it to others. So yeah, you can connect with me on there, and I'll provide the personal email in the show notes.
That's fantastic. All right. Well, thank you so much, Sean, for taking the time to chat with us about your change into a career in aviation. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on, Jim. And stay the course out there, guys. It's pull the Band-Aid off and just do it. You won't regret it.
Thanks once again to Sean for joining us on this episode of Fly the Transition. A couple of things that I liked about the conversation I had with Sean is he was able to correlate some of the things from his time as a realtor into aviation, such as problem solving specifically. He talks about how not every sale is going to be a slam dunk, and then he correlates that to not every flight's going to be a slam dunk. So there's some importance from taking those problem solving skills and now applying them to aviation to get the job done. The other skill he was able to translate was that of his customer service skills. One of the really big takeaways in that space for me was people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. The type of flying he does involves a lot more interaction with the customer, and with that, customer service plays a really key role. So with those two things in mind, here's the point that I'm trying to make as far as the skills that you acquire from your prior career. Just because you're leaving one field and trying to transition into aviation doesn't mean that those skills you acquired before are just done. They don't matter anymore. You're going to be able to bring those to the table and have those experiences that if you can find a way to correlate those skills to aviation and talk about it articulately, it's going to make you all the better of a candidate. The last thing that I love from him in this episode is talking about giving back to aviation. He was fortunate to have some people in the industry early on that were able to give him some guidance and mentoring, and he's made it a point to give back in that same space to help others understand how they can get into a career in aviation. So I'm grateful that he was able to come onto the podcast and share that story, and I'm hoping that some of you maybe have heard this, they feel inspired, or even want to connect with him to try to understand how aviation might fit into their future. So as we wrap up this episode of Fly the Transition, just a quick reminder, if you haven't yet, please leave a rating and review wherever you're listening to this podcast. It really does help to spread the word and get the attention of the algorithms of the podcast platforms. And if you leave me a review, I will be sure to read it on a future episode. Another great way you can help out is if you know someone who could benefit from the Fly the Transition podcast, please be sure to share it with them, whether you send them a link or point them in our direction on their favorite podcast player. Every little bit helps, and we just want to spread the word of aviation for everyone who's interested. And finally, if you are going through or if you have made a transition into a career in aviation and want to be a guest, I'd love to hear from you. So please send me an email, flythetransition@gmail.com, and we'll try to have you as a guest on a future episode. Thank you all so much for joining me on this episode of Fly the Transition, and until next time, keep your eyes on the skies and your dreams soaring high.
You've been listening to Fly the Transition. Life is too short for you not to do what you love. And our passion is to give you all the tools you need to make the transition from doing what you do to being in the aviation industry. We hope you've enjoyed the show. If you did, make sure to like, rate, and review. And we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, you can reach out by email at flythetransition@gmail.com. Find us on Facebook at Fly the Transition. And the website for Flying Midwest Media is flyingmidwest.com. Keep soaring. See you next time on Fly the Transition.